Welcome, everyone. It is Saturday, July the 4th, 2020. It is currently 4:42 p.m. Central Time, and I am coming to you live from Victory Baptist Church located here in Ovalo, Texas. Now, I guess I could say one of the fun things about having a podcast, one of the interesting things about having a podcast is I never really know from hour to hour what I may end up talking about the next time I have the microphone in front of me. Now, I will wake up or maybe even before I go to bed or when I wake up, I'll start formulating a plan in my mind going, okay, today I want to talk about this, and today I want to talk about this, and I'll have a plan. I'll have kind of an idea. Okay, I want to do 5 programs. Here are the topics, and I'll kind of have an idea and a plan. But sometimes I'll have that plan even written down. But the second I stand in front of the microphone or sit down in front of the microphone and hit the go live button, those plans get pushed to the side because, well, I have something else I want to talk about. I hear something, I see something else happens, which changes everything. And the reason it's interesting, and I love that about podcasting is because there's just so much always happening around us, to us, that there's never a shortage of things to talk about. I mean, I could do live broadcasting 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 hours a day. And you think I'm exaggerating, but there's always just so many things to think about, to consider. We in 2020, we literally can drown in information. We can drown in so much content, whether it's movies, music, podcasts, news, books. We just have there's just so much floating around. And at any time when you come in contact with it, and if you do podcasts, you can go, oh, I'm going to talk about that. That's why I always hate to have a podcast that restricts me, because I want the freedom to be able to talk about anything. And the good thing is, well, theology basically relates to everything. So I really feel like I have that freedom. But yes, here's another example. I had a plan. Got in my car to drive here to church with my plan ready to go. No, I already had everything ready, knew exactly what I was going to do. But here I am in front of the microphone. And guess what? I'm not following that plan. We're going to talk about a very controversial subject, but I hope this will alleviate a lot of the controversy and maybe provide a more balanced perspective. Now, I have stated over and over and over and over and over again that one of the key words, one of the key ideas for the Christian life is the idea of balance. We want to maintain a biblical balance because in so many areas, especially in theology, sometimes in the church and our own Christian lives, we can run to an extreme that is not biblical. Now, we may convince ourselves that it's a biblical extreme, but we'll say it's a biblical perspective, but in reality, it's an extreme. It takes maybe a biblical truth, and then we take it to an extreme level. And I think we have to always be on the lookout for that. And again, now we got to be honest here. If the Bible pushes us to what others may call an extreme, then we go there. But we don't want to end up in an extreme way of thinking that's not biblical. We do not want to do that. Biblical. I don't know why I'm having trouble saying that word today, but we don't want to go where the Bible doesn't lead us. And so many times in Christianity, you see these weird extremes on all kinds of different subjects. And there is one subject, and trust me, this doesn't just happen in the church. It happens in culture. I mean, you see it right now. You name a subject and everybody runs to an extreme and they yell and they scream at everyone else. And sometimes whenever you have a controversial issue, the truth is somewhere in the middle. We need a balanced approach, a very thoughtful approach to many issues. And again, for the Christian, we need a biblical approach. We need a Bible a Bible approach, and we don't want to go to extremes. I think that's very important. And with that in mind, let me just name the subject. And you know it's controversial. Climate change. Global warming. Now, you say climate change or global warming, you will get some extremes, and you know that. You're going to get those who say the whole thing is a hoax, none of it is real, who cares? It's all a bunch of garbage. I'm just going to do what I want. And they don't care. They don't think anything needs to be done to protect the environment, and they just ignore all of it. On the other side, the other extreme is, yes, global warming, climate change is real. It's our fault. We need to stop everything that we do. We need to shut everything down. No more oil, no more this, no more that. I mean, just let's go back to the, let's go back to the early stages of civilization where I guess we have no electricity, no heat, no air, no anything. And because we're all going to die in, 15 minutes. So everyone runs to this extreme, like it's all a hoax, it's all a lie, or we're all going to die in 15 minutes. Those are extremes. Now, when theology gets involved, theology, if you think about the Bible, tries to offer a pretty biblical, thoughtful approach. And obviously it's going to be a biblical approach because, well, it's the Bible. So let's think about it. We open our Bibles, and we read in Genesis chapter 1, verse 1, that in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. So immediately we know that everything around us, all this planet, the environment, it's all created by God. So if it's created by God, then a biblical way of thinking would be, well, we need to care for it. We need to be grateful for it. We need to be good stewards of it. God created it. He put us here. And if you remember back in the garden when he created Adam and Eve, he put them there to tend the garden. Yes, they were to have dominion, but they were there to care for it. They had a responsibility to it. I believe that as Christians, God created the heavens and the earth. He put us here, and we have a responsibility to it that we glorify God in how we care for, maintain, and use all the things around us, that we want to glorify God in it, right? We don't want to destroy it. We don't want to abuse it. We want to glorify God in how we care for and look after and tend and maintain this place that he has given us. The heavens and the earth, he has created them, and they belong ultimately to him, and we are to simply be stewards of it. I think that's a biblical approach. However, there is an extreme that happens. When people abandon God, they turn from God. What ultimately happens is once they turn from God, they replace God with something, because everyone's going to worship something, okay? Atheist, agnostic, everyone worships something. You may worship self, you may worship, other people, you may worship a relationship, you may worship your job. You're going to put something. If you remove God, something is going to be put in the place of God. And for many, they have removed the Creator and they have begun to worship the creation. They have removed God and now they begin to worship the creation, and their religion is, we have to serve the Mother Nature. We have to serve her. We have to protect her. We have to do all of these things. And they almost treat it like, they get so caught up in their religion, it basically becomes a religion, that in many cases they begin to ignore maybe actual science. They begin to turn to pseudoscience, and they create a religion. And if you don't go along with them, then you are the heretic. You are the apostate. You are to be condemned. And for many, the creation, the earth, the planet, the material world has become their God, and caring for it and, worrying about it has become their religion. And this is a very biblical idea, all right? It's a very biblical idea. In fact, go to Romans chapter 1. You probably know the passage, Romans chapter 1. Romans chapter 1. Verse 22, Romans chapter 1, verse 22, professing themselves to be wise, they became fools. Now, in fact, let's go back to verse 20. For the invisible things of him from the creation of the world are clearly seen, being understood by the powers that are made, even so his eternal power and Godhead, so they are without excuse. So the existence of God can be seen, can be proven by looking at creation, looking at all the things around us. It screams that there is a God. It screams there is a creator, because believing it just got here by accident doesn't make any sense. And so they who deny God, they are without excuse. Verse 21, because that when they knew God, they glorified him not as God, neither were thankful, but became vain in their imaginations, and their foolish heart was darkened. All right. So they begin to reject God. They become vain in their thinking, vain in their imagination, and their foolish heart is darkened. They find themselves in darkness. They don't truly understand. They think they understand. In fact, they profess themselves to be wise, but they become fools. They become fools spiritually speaking, and change the glory of the uncorruptible God into an image made like to corruptible man, and to birds and four-footed beasts and creeping things. They reject God, and then they begin to create, in this particular case, idols, but they make them like the creation. They reject the Creator and begin to worship things like the creation. Wherefore God gave them up to uncleanliness through the lust of their own hearts, to dishonor their own bodies between themselves. Now look what happens. Romans 1:25. Who changed the truth of God into a lie and worshiped and served the creature more than the Creator, who is blessed forever. Amen. I want to read that again. They changed the truth of God into a lie and worshiped and served the creature more than the Creator, who is blessed forever. Amen. They remove God. They replace God with the creation. They begin to serve the creature. They begin to serve the creation. They begin to worship the creation. Once God is removed, people will replace God with something. And Romans indicates they replace it with an idolatry of the creation, of the creature. They begin to worship it. And so in many cases, I think what you've seen is that you either have people who just say, oh, all of that's a bunch of garbage, and they act like they don't need to care about the climate. They don't have a biblical view. They don't have a biblical worldview when it comes to caring for the earth, that we're stewards of it, that we should glorify God in how we use it and how we maintain it. Many Christians don't even care about any environmental issues. They think that's just a bunch of liberal nonsense. No, the Bible calls for you to glorify God in it, care for it, because God created it. It's God's property. We're living here as stewards of it, and we should glorify God in how we use it. That's a biblical approach. But those who reject God will replace the creation, will replace the creature. They put the creation and the creature in the place where God should be, and they begin to worship it. And this is what drives a lot of the environmental activists. It's a materialistic worldview where the creation and the environment and the climate and all of this becomes their God. It's almost a religious issue. It's a theological issue. Now, let's be fair. We can sit there and criticize all day the atheists, the agnostics, and all of those quote-unquote environmentalist wackos and call them tree huggers, and we can give them all kinds of condescending names and mock them. But I want to make sure we look at Christians and the church. Many cases, the Christians and the church have been silent on environmental issues. Man, I'm having trouble speaking today. They have been silent on it, where we should have been the ones speaking up. Hey, this is God's creation. Let's care for it. What can we do that is reasonable? What can we do based on good science and good information? But we should have never, we almost bought into kind of a conservative way of thinking, not a biblical way of thinking. Conservative way of thinking and a biblical way of thinking are two drastically different things. We need a biblical way of thinking about the environment. We need to look at it carefully. Now, I say all of that because just about 20 minutes ago, I heard an interview with someone who wrote a book called Apocalypse Never. Apocalypse Never. And the more I listen to the interview, the more I'm like, everyone needs to know about this book and everyone should get a copy of this book and read this book. I really wish I could get everyone to purchase a copy. The name of the book is Apocalypse Never: Why Environmental Alarmism Hurt Us All. Now, this was published June the 30th, 2020, so just a few days ago. Apocalypse Never: Why Environmental Alarmism Hurt Us All. Now, what I'm going to do is I will put a post about this book on the theologycentral.net blog. Go to theologycentral.net, go to the blog section, and I will put a picture of the book, some information, and a links where you can get to it on Amazon. So, because I think everyone should take some time and read this book. Here's some description here about it. Climate change is real, but it's not the end of the world. It's not even our most serious environmental problem. Michael Shellenberger, and that's the name of the author, Michael Shellenberger, has been fighting for a greener planet for decades. He helped save the world's last unprotected redwoods. He co-created the predecessor to today's Green New Deal, and he led a successful effort by climate scientists and activists to keep nuclear plants operating, preventing a spike of emissions. All right. So this is a person who's been an environmentalist. Just think of all the things he's done. He helped save the world's last unprotected redwoods. He co-created the predecessor to today's Green New Deal, and he led a successful effort by climate scientists and activists to keep nuclear plants operating, preventing a spike of emissions. But in 2019, as some claimed billions of people are going to die, contributing to rising anxiety, including among adolescents, Shellenberger decided that as a lifelong environmental activist, leading energy expert, and father of a teenage daughter, he needed to speak out to separate science from fiction. So here's a book, not written by a conservative, written by someone who is an environmentalist, probably would be far more in line with many liberal ideas. And he's the one going, wait a minute. This whole situation is turning into fiction. It's turning into craziness. And we're not facing an environmental apocalypse. It's an apocalypse never. It's not coming. We've got other issues. And then he decided to write a book to try to explain all of this and make the science, to put the science in a book in a way that would be easily understood by everyone. Now, I think that's something very important because we want the facts. That's all we should want. We don't want hype. We don't want propaganda. We don't want exaggeration. We don't want hyperbole. We want facts because once we have those facts, then we can move forward. But as Christians, I want to make sure we understand. We start with the biblical approach. God is the creator of heaven and earth. It's his property. He put us here. We are to be stewards of it, and we are to glorify him and how we use it, how we protect it, and how we maintain it. That's the biblical approach, right? That is the approach we have to consider. This book is not going to come at it from a biblical approach, but what it's going to try to do is provide some scientific evidence to counter the narrative that has captured so much of the world and has caused so many people to be fearful, and I will argue to counter what's almost become religious dogma. And the reason it's become religious dogma is because they have rejected God and they've placed the creation in the place of God. So in reality, the debate about environmentalism and climate change, first and foremost, at its fundamental level, it's a theological issue. It's a theological debate. The problem is the church really can't have that theological debate because we've demonstrated that we don't actually believe the climate was created by God because we don't we seem to have thrown off our responsibility to be stewards of it and to glorify God and trying to maintain it, protect it, and use it in a correct way. And so that's once the church abandoned its theological responsibility to addressing the issues in the environment, well, then the people who reject God, they took the mantle and they began to address it from their theological perspective, which is to worship the creature, worship creation, because they've rejected God. All right, I want to make sure I'm being very precise in how I explain this because there's a theological connection. But what I want to do is play this interview. I'll be interrupting, and this is what's fascinating. He's even going to mention the religious aspect to it, the theological aspect to it. This was on secular radio, and he's even going to mention that part of the reasons we've reached this hysteria with the climate, saying we're all going to die in 12 years, is because they have turned from God. Yeah, this was fascinating. So let's listen and we'll talk about it. Here we go.
What you're about to hear is the fusion of entertainment and enlightenment. This is the Glenn Beck Program.
You know, I've for a long time been labeled a climate denier, and I don't know why, because I don't deny that there is climate. I also don't argue with the fact that for a while the temperature of the Earth was rising and the climate could be changing. And I also don't dismiss that maybe man has a little something to do with it. It seems like that could be rational. I've just not agreed with the goals of the leadership, which seems to be more about politics and capitalism and the destruction of it than it does about climate change. I have a problem with the solutions and the reason why we want to enact these solutions. Well, I guess that's been bad for a long, long time, but now you're going to have to put the guy in who is Time Magazine named him Hero of the Environment for 2008. He is an expert on this, and he's just written a new book called Apocalypse Never, Why Environmental Alarmism Hurts Us All. Remember, this is a guy who is an environmentalist, still is an environmentalist, has been a part of this, but had to speak out because it's getting out of control. A very brave individual, Mike Schellenberger, author of Apocalypse Never, joins us in 1 minute.
This is the Glenn Beck Program.
All right, when it comes to the gold standard in grilling action, there's a new sheriff in town. Rectech grills have revolutionized the very concept of grilling, at least for me, and I think a lot of Americans. Before I got one, I didn't really like to grill because I'm not very good at it. Now, it's as if I've always been a professional chef at the grill. My family and we've been using it to cook everything. We're going to try bread in it. You can actually bake desserts in it. It is crazy. And it's because it has smart technology and temperature sensors that work together to make sure that you get an evenly heated, perfectly cooked meal. It's not just amazing because it's built out of, solid, heavy stainless steel.
Didn't realize they had a commercial put in there, but since we don't obviously have sponsors or a contract with said company, then and they may not want their thing being advertised on a theology podcast, I'll bring that. I'll reduce that volume. I apologize for that.
Really sorry to report about that, but my daughter is a vegan, so we've been cooking stuff in it that I've never even seen before. Right. Animal, vegetable, mineral. I can only say it's not an animal.
All right, he's mocking that his daughter's a vegan.
The Rectech grills on social media.
Okay, here we go. They promote this grill like crazy every episode. I thought in their podcast they removed it, but
for grillers,
they did.
Rectech grills with an S. It's RECT.
I'm waiting. Here we go. Come on. We want to hear about the book. That's what we want to hear.
With an S /
Here we go.
Do it now.
Tonight, the episode they don't want you to see.
Okay, now they're doing an advertisement for Blaze TV. He probably wouldn't mind me promoting that, but I want to be careful not to. I don't want to do any violation of anything. Okay. So. So.
9 p.m. Eastern, only at blazetv.com.
Yeah, Blaze TV. All right, come on. Here we go.
Machine. You can watch that episode last week. This week's episode is taking on the 1619 Project and exposing the truth.
Now, I do want to hear Blaze TV. They're going to do an episode where they look at the 1619 Project. That 1619 Project is a very popular podcast, so I am interested to see how they what they come up with that. So I may have to subscribe to Blaze TV to watch that tonight.
An incredible hero of today's world. He is coming out knowing that this is probably going to be the end of his career. Hopefully not. But he is coming out and saying, look, I'm an environmentalist. There are some things going on, but this craziness about we're all going to die is not true. Author of the book Apocalypse Never, Mike Schellenberger. Welcome to the program. How are you, Mike?
Good. Thanks for having me on, Glenn.
Hey, you're welcome. I'm sorry if it's uncomfortable for you to be on the program, but...
Oh, no, not at all. I talk to I believe it. I mean, look, this is what America's for, right? We should be able to talk to people we disagree with.
Where the hell did you come from? Did you just wake up, or were you cryogenically frozen? That's not America anymore, apparently. So, yeah. Michael, I have great respect for you because you are saying, look, I'm still an environmentalist. I still care about all these things, but we've got to rein this in. It's been crazy what people have been saying, that we're going to die in 12 years and, you know, we have no time to reverse all of this. And then their solutions are insane. Why did you decide to go from hero to what could be zero and write this book?
Well, I've been an environmentalist for over 30 years. I've been a climate activist for over 20 years. And I'm also a father of a 14-year-old girl, and she's fine because I talk to her about the science. But her friends are very scared. A lot of them are afraid they won't live long enough to have children. And I've talked to them about this, and they've said they needed something that really explained the science in a clear way to them. And so I dedicated the book to my children. I wrote this book because I knew that if adolescent girls had to pick between the image, they would pick Greta Thunberg over me, a boring old dad. So I needed to put all of the evidence in one place. My views are very clear. I think climate change is real. I think humans are contributing to it. I also know that it's not the end of the world. There's no science that suggests that it's the end of the world, nor that it's apocalyptic or catastrophic. And there's just a lot of stuff people don't know. Most people don't know that deaths from natural disasters have declined 90% over the last 100 years. They've declined 80% over the last 40 years. Meanwhile, carbon emissions peaked and declined in most rich countries several decades ago. They peaked and declined in Britain, France, and Germany in the mid-'70s. They peaked in the United States almost 15 years ago, thanks to the fracking revolution, thanks to natural gas. These are basic. But
now that's bad. Michael, now that's bad.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. I mean, in my book, I talk about... there's really three parts to the book. The first part is a debunking of common environmental myths around climate change, Amazon deforestation, plastic waste, meat, species extinction. The second part of the book is how humans actually save nature. How did we save the whales? Right? We saved the whales by using petroleum and palm oil instead of using whale oil. So it wasn't Greenpeace that saved the whales. It was American ingenuity, European ingenuity, and capitalism. So I go through how we say, and the last part of the book is why, if environmental problems are important but manageable, how did we come to see them as the end of the world? And that's where I look at the three big factors I view as money, power, and religion. which is basically that as people stop believing in God, as they imagine themselves to be secular or atheists, we have a need as humans for faith. We have a need for belief. And so people construct alternative religions that are based on pseudoscience and really can be quite crazy. And so I waited last year for scientists or my fellow activists or other journalists to speak out against the alarmism. Nobody did, and I knew nobody would because of the climate of cowardice that exists around this. And I felt I needed to speak out, and you know, I'm old enough now to just kind of feel like let the chips fall where they may.
Good for you.
I want you to hear that. His explanation for how we got here, that, you know, we're all going to die, and there's this anxiety and panic when anytime people talk about climate change and we can't have a balanced, thoughtful approach, is because as people moved away from God, well, they got to have something to worship. They got to have something to put their faith in, and now he doesn't quote Romans, but Romans tells us what it is. It's the creation, it's the creature, and it's the worship of the materialistic world. And then they turn to pseudoscience about what's happening and then get manipulated for political gain. People manipulate them for political gain. Hey, the world's going to blow up. You better vote for us. Give us money. So it becomes about money and power. And the people of this new religion get manipulated and, well, get hijacked by politics. That's happened to Christianity as well. So I just thought that that's very interesting that there's a theological element to it and that even he acknowledges. Let's continue.
You know, there's just some things that are more important than people being mean to you on Twitter. So, and one of those things is the psychological health of my children and of my children's friends.
So you know what happened to the founder of Greenpeace. I mean, he was one of the original founders. They wanted to ban an element on the table of elements. And they said, you can't do that. He said, you can't ban an element. And he was no longer welcome, and he doesn't have a name. With the cowardice that is going on right now, even though you are very well reasoned, I mean, honestly, you would be the kind of guy where I would feel comfortable saying, I'm an environmentalist, because I am. I own a lot of property. And I care about the environment. I care about the earth. I want clean water. I want clean air. But the people that are running these things, I grew up with my grandfather who was a farmer in the Pacific Northwest. And he said, these people have zero experience. They are stopping the controlled burns. They're going to be responsible for burning down the entire West. When they started messing with the balance of the wolves in Yellowstone, he said the same thing. They don't know. They're so arrogant and they have no practical experience. You talk about the kind of common sense things that the person who's actually living it believes and can do. Where are the rest of them?
Well, I mean, I think the interesting thing, while I was doing research for Apocalypse Never, I discovered that the vast majority of scientists are good scientists. So in part of this, I wrote this book to defend the science, and the majority of scientists, the silent majority, who stick to the facts, there's a small, tiny, it's not even it's a small handful of apocalyptic Malthusian scientists who think there's too many people in the world, who give their information to people like Greta Thunberg. I interviewed them. So I interviewed the four main apocalyptic scientists, and it was very interesting. First of all four of them, immediately their intuitive response was to blame journalists for having misquoted them, which you can make of that what you will. I mean, what I did in this book and the research for it is I basically went to the sources and I said, what are you pointing to that you think is catastrophic or apocalyptic? And none of them could answer that question. They all came up short. I called them out on it. I first called them out on it last year in Forbes because I wanted to give them a chance to respond and try to correct me or cancel me or something. None of them did, because when you stand up to bullies, they back down, actually. All bullies are actually cowards. And I stood up to them last year. None of them defended themselves because I knew I had caught them out on this. So now it's in the book, and there's in Apocalypse Never, I go through exactly what you said. All of the increase in frequency and intensity of fires in the United States, Australia, are due to more buildup of wood fuel in forests, because we environmentalists don't like smoke and fires. It's the buildup of wood fuel in forests, and it's more houses near forests. Those two things. Now, is the fire season growing in length? Yes, it is. Is hotter weather contributing to fires? Probably is. Here's the thing: it's not that climate change isn't happening or that's not having any effect. It's that it's being outweighed still by these other factors. I mean, look at flooding, for example. If you go to the difference between whether you are flooded or not depends on whether you have a flood control system. It doesn't matter whether you have 1 or 2 inches more rainfall. And yet, if you read the New York Times, you would think that floods that are occurring are because of climate change. Well, no, they're because of inadequate flood control, which is something that we can control. I mean, that's good news. So there's a lot of good news here. Even the amount of land that we use for food production has been going down, which is wonderful news because that's the main impact that humans have on the natural environment. So really, everything that people have been told about, almost everything that people have been told about the environment is wrong on the facts. I go through it all in Apocalypse Never, and then I want to go a step further and say what really matters and how is it that everybody became so crazy.
So I'd like to go there with you, Michael. Let me take a 1-minute break, and then we'll come back. Michael Shellenberger, Time Magazine's environmental hero of the environment for 2008. He is still an environmentalist. He's just trying to set the record straight. He admits that he has been part of this problem because he didn't speak out until now, but he says enough is enough. And the name of the book is Apocalypse Never. You want to do something to let your voice be heard? Go buy this book. Make it the #1 book on the New York Times. Geez, they'll hate that. Make sure you support the people who are having, even if you don't agree with them, that have the balls to stand up and say the truth. This guy is rolling the dice that he's not going to be destroyed. I hope he's not, but good chance he will be. Apocalypse Never, Why Environmental Alarmism Hurts Us All. From the climate change side, Michael Shellenberger. We'll continue in 1 minute. First, let me tell you about Relief Factor. What is it like to be out of pain for the first time in years?
They got to do their commercials. Now,
really good.
I agree. I think
that made me feel better and helped me get my
when
life back. Then I discovered
when you have someone out there trying to give you the facts and give you the information, we need to support it. So I would challenge you to purchase the book, but read the book. Have the book, go through the facts, and where you kind of really know what's going on. And then when you hear the misinformation, some parents like that don't even have discussions with their children about climate change or any of these things. They just just dismiss it. No, engage them so that they're not fearful. Just telling them don't worry about it. It's all garbage. It's all lies. And everywhere they look, they're being told the whole world's going to blow up in 5 minutes. Just because you are dismissive and almost in a condescending, mocking way doesn't mean your kids just ignore it. They go to other sources to get information. So engage them, and this would be a good book to go to read together as a family. Have them read it, you read it, and discuss it so that you know the actual facts about what's happening in the environment. That's so reasonable.
Mike Shellenberger.
Here we go.
He's the author of Apocalypse Never. So what have you found when you started really looking in and deciding to expose this? How did we get here, Michael?
Well, it's a great question. I mean, there was a conservation movement, as you mentioned. I think you consider yourself a conservationist. I consider myself a conservationist. I mean, really up until World War II, we all basically agreed that lifting everybody out of poverty was a good thing and protecting the natural environment was a good thing. After World War II, a bunch of really anti-human ideas took hold. They came from a British economist named Thomas Malthus. I don't mean to use jargon, but this idea of Malthusianism is that there's just too many people in the world. After World War II, that took over the conservation movement. By 1970, this really dark view that there's too many people in the world, they even called it lifeboat ethics. Nothing ethical about it, but the idea was we're in the lifeboat, which is a lifeboat of prosperity. Other people are trying to get in, and we should keep them out. That was the idea. And they did a bunch of things. I mean, the first thing that they did that was very important is that because by the 1950s, with the invention of nuclear energy, we knew that there would never, ever again be resource scarcity on Earth. We'd have infinite energy, infinite water, infinite fertilizer, infinite food. So this is very threatening to anybody who's seeking to take control over the economy by frightening people of environmental resource scarcity. So what they had to do was to attack and demonize nuclear. And it was very easy to do because people were already scared of nuclear weapons. Of course, nuclear power plants are not nuclear weapons, but they basically got the public confused about it. So much of the quote-unquote environmental movement has spent the last half century attacking our cleanest, best source of energy for the environment and proposing sources of energy.
I can't tell you, Michael. Michael, I have to tell you, just saying that from a guy who is on climate change, just saying that, I can guarantee you there are people that are listening all over America going, thank God. Thank God somebody is finally saying that. You can't be an environmentalist if you're against safe nuclear energy. You just can't be. It's the safest, cleanest energy available.
Well, this is the question that really drove me to write, one of the questions that drove me to write Apocalypse Never, which was, why are the people who are the most alarmist about climate change opposed to the only things that can reduce carbon emissions, which is basically transitioning from coal to natural gas and then to nuclear? That's it. I mean, it's not – people try to make it complicated because they don't want to do those things. Natural gas and nuclear are the only fuels that can really substitute for coal and keep the economy strong and prosperous. So why is that? And what I got to was because they don't really care about climate change. This isn't about climate change. This is about getting control over the economy, over the society, about moving the whole society to a low energy. They want to return to an agrarian economy. That's why they have these really bad romantic visions that you read of everybody's going to be a small farmer again. I'll tell you something. I've spent 30 years interviewing small farmers in poor countries. Very few children of small farmers want to remain small farmers. They want to move to the city. They want to, obviously some of us really like living in the country and we like being farmers, but only 2% of us work on farms. All of our prosperity comes from actually not being an agrarian economy anymore and being an industrial economy. So what is environmentalism in its most mainstream and yet very radical manifestation do? It's trying to deprive industrialization to poor countries. That's unconscionable.
Thank you. More with Michael Shellenberger. Does this guy make sense? Does this guy make you say, okay, I could be an environmentalist because this makes sense? Apocalypse Never, buy the book. Michael Shellenberger returns in a minute.
This is the Glenn Beck Program.
And I would agree.
We have to agree on everything.
Buy the book.
What's it worth for you right now to sell your home?
Okay, I was making sure that was a commercial. All right. I apologize that the commercials are in the audio. Usually they're edited out. So
I know your brother-in-law.
They're just there, so nothing I can do about it now because I'm live on the air, right? So, yes, buy the book, and he's making some very valid arguments. If you care about the environment, then you've got to go. We've got to have things for energy. Things are still going to move forward unless you're just going to, let's destroy all the cities and let's just go back to, the early stages of civilization. which everyone tried to move and build cities. Okay, well, whatever. But if you're going to argue that you want to save the environment, you've got to try to go with the safest energy solutions available, and it seems to be nuclear and natural gas. If that's the case, then you got to go there. And if you're not even going to go there, then do you really care about saving the environment? And is the real motivation power and control? And if that and is it more religious dogma than science? And have they misused science and try to convince everyone that if you don't go along with their ideas that you're a science denier? Now, again, doesn't mean there isn't climate change. Doesn't mean there aren't environmental issues. There are. The key is we need true science to figure those things out. All right.
Michael Schellenberger is our guest. He was Time Magazine named him the hero of the environment in 2008. He's a leading energy security environmental expert. He is a guy that, helped Obama, invest in green energy, et cetera, et cetera. And he has not had a change of heart on the environment, but he has gained some courage after talking to his daughter, who was freaking out about we're all going to die in 12 years. And he realized this has gotten way out of control, and he is speaking out, and he's written this new book, Apocalypse Never. I urge you to buy it and read it. One of the quotes in here is, today, rich nations should do everything they can to help poor nations industrialize. Instead, as we see, many of them are doing something closer to the opposite, seeking to make poverty sustainable rather than to make poverty history. I have to tell you, Michael, this has been one of the biggest things that has stuck out to me as absolutely immoral. We have a chance of bringing the world out of abject poverty like Americans don't understand. And instead, we're telling them, no, you got to live this way. You can't have the things that we have because it's bad, and we're trying to get rid of them. Not only are they killing us, with this dream of we all have a farm, they're actually keeping people in poverty. It's horrific.
Yeah, it's unconscionable. I mean, I was trained as a cultural anthropologist. I've been traveling to poor countries and interviewing small farmers for over 30 years. And yeah, obviously, there's a lot of causes of why countries are poor, but there's no reason we should be helping them to stay poor. Just a few years ago, there was a movement to make poverty history. Whatever happened to that? It's like it got taken over by the climate alarmist movement, which has been focused on depriving poor countries not just the fossil fuels they need to develop, but also the large hydroelectric dams. I mean, I talk about my trip to the Congo, one of the poorest countries in the world. There's an active effort to deny the Congo the resources they need to build large hydroelectric dams, which are absolutely essential to pulling people out of poverty. And the craziest part about it, in my research, I discovered that one of the main groups that tries to prevent poor countries from getting financing from the World Bank and other international development banks to build dams is based in my hometown of Berkeley, California. Well, guess where Berkeley gets its electricity from? So, from hydroelectric dams. It's one of the first things that poor countries do when they start to develop. It's what the Tennessee Valley Authority was in the 1930s. So this is really, it's just unconscionable. It needed to be called out. There's major groups, including the Sierra Club, that support efforts to deprive poor countries energy, and honestly, they've taken over the World Bank. So the World Bank used to fund the basics of development: roads, electricity grids, sewage systems, flood control dams. Now they fund democracy workshops and empowerment workshops and solar panels and batteries, that are very expensive and unreliable, that they want to have people, to give people on the farm. Well, most people gain access to electricity and modern life by moving to the cities. It's the urbanization. Half of us now live in cities. You don't have to move to the city. Nobody's going to make you move to the city.
No, if you like to be a I own a farm and a ranch, and I have to tell you, I get out of the tractor at any time I want. I own the land. I don't want to farm full time. It is hard work. There's a reason why we have a shortage of farmers in America. It's unbelievably difficult to do, and it's a really hard life. So let me ask you, Michael, is it Malthusianism? Is it anti-capitalism, Marxism? What is it that's driving this?
Well, this is the funniest thing, and it was driving me crazy because Marx attacked Malthus in the mid-1800s as a stain on the human race. He hated Malthus. So I was trying to understand, how is it that the left, the tradition of Marx and socialism, how is it the left came to embrace Malthus? And what I discovered is that basically there was an accommodation in the 60s and 70s between the socialists and the Malthusians, and the agreement they came up to, and I'm not saying it was like a formal agreement, it was what resulted from the argument, was that they were going to work together to basically lower standards of living in the United States by moving towards renewables and a low-energy society. That's the strategy and goal of all the big environmental groups. And then they were going to do charitable work in poor countries so that we would all sort of meet in the middle. Now, of course, that's not what actually happens because environmentalists are some of the richest people in the world. They're not giving up their jet travel. I document how even when they try, Greta Thunberg made a huge deal of trying to sail from Europe to the United States. Well, it turned out her carbon footprint was larger because in order to have the sailing crew had to fly back. So you had a four-person sailing crew that had to fly back from the United States to Britain. And so it's all a fantasy, And so when I say that environmentalists, and the research is very clear on this, environmentalists are much more likely to be atheistic and secular and not believe in traditional gods. But we need to believe in something. All of us need to believe in something that some part of us will continue on. And whether you're Christian or Jewish or whatever, you need something. So when people give that up, they end up creating new religions. And so they think, for example, my neighbors in Berkeley, they imagine that gardening is somehow getting them back integrated into nature. So you see all the Michael Pollan books, all these romantic. That's not farming. Gardening is not farming. Like we would starve to death if we depended on my garden. Like we would die.
Right.
Like there's actually so it tends to be people in cities. It tends to be wealthier people. It tends to be people that are secular who embrace this new secular religion. And I argue in the book that environmentalism, apocalyptic environmentalism in particular, has become the dominant religion of supposedly secular people in the West. So it's people at the United Nations. It's people that are in very powerful positions who are trying to impose quote unquote nature's order on societies. And of course, the problem is nobody can figure out what nature is and what it's not. It's not a particularly good basis for organizing your economy because there's just a lot of stuff in nature that we don't like disease and poverty and misery. So I argue in the book, and I thought this would be something that conservatives would like, although there's been a mixed reaction. But I think the Judeo-Christian tradition is a humanistic tradition. There's an idea that we have dominion over the earth, that God gave us the earth to use the resources to prosper. That idea is effectively rejected by environmentalists who view humans as a cancer on the earth, as a virus on the earth. And so what I argue is we need to get back to that humanistic tradition. And in fact, the evidence is overwhelming that as we take care of our children, as we prosper, as we take care of our societies, that over time, our impact on the environment goes down because we move from energy dilute fuels, from wood and dung to coal to natural gas to eventually nuclear. And our ecological footprint gets smaller. I mean, this is the big lie, that going from environmental progress is going from renewables to fossil fuels to nuclear. The environmental movement has it exactly wrong. They want to take people from nuclear to fossil fuels to renewables. That would increase humankind's environmental impact because it takes 400 times more land to generate the same amount of electricity from a solar or wind farm as it does from a natural gas or a nuclear plant.
there's not enough land in the United States to be able to do it. I mean, the numbers are staggering to see for us to try to replace it, at least today. Maybe in 50 years, maybe not today. I've only got a couple of minutes, and I want to hit two more things with you. First of all, Greta Thunberg, I actually feel bad for her because I think she has some of the worst parents in the world. They have filled her head with all of this frightening stuff, and we didn't steal her childhood. I think her parents and the terrifying science that has gone along with this that is wrong. I think they stole her childhood. Your thoughts?
Yeah, she's definitely, for sure. I mean, Greta's in the grip of a bad religion. She's a victim of this toxic, anti-human, depressing, neurotic, phobic philosophy, and she's spreading it, and it's actually very psychologically harmful and dangerous and bad for poor countries. So yeah, I don't see, I'm with you. I kind of go, she's clearly a victim. She clearly hasn't done any research at all. She's been talking to the most pseudoscientific Malthusian scientists in the world, who I debunk at length in Apocalypse Never. So yes.
Now, the reaction to your book, science, do the scientists know that they've set themselves back like 500 years by silencing debate and dissent, and the science is settled, and maybe we should put deniers into jail and everything else? Do they know how much damage that has been done to their trade and to their craft and to science
Some
itself?
Do. Yeah, some do. Now, I was invited by the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change to become an expert reviewer late last year. I know that came because I had been criticizing the alarmism. I was also invited to testify in front of Congress. I've been invited to testify to governments around the world. And I know for a fact that there are many scientists who are very good people and good scientists who totally disagree with the alarmism, but they're afraid of their colleagues. I mean, you have to remember that the alarmist scientists who are truly in the grip of this toxic religion are bullies. Their tactics are bullying tactics, and I actually described them and discovered them, but I've known about them for a long time. I myself have been subject to them. And so they make all sorts of, they lie about you. They claim that you're taking money from somebody. They claim that that you hate nature or something. They basically just attack you personally. But what I find is that when you confront them and you stand up to them on the evidence, and you get a very clear, and that's why there's 100 pages of my 400-page book are all footnotes. They're all scientific references. So I think the reason they're attacking my book, and you may have noticed that my Forbes column was taken down.
Yep.
But the defensiveness is, I think, justified. They know that my book is dangerous to the radical left, which took over the conservation movement in the 60s. They know that my book is devastating for the alarmist and apocalyptic case. That's why they're freaking out about it. I'm confident that that in the long term, truth will win out. I mean, obviously, there's this bigger problem of what do you do with people that they need to believe in something and they end up making up all sorts of bad religions. I don't know how to solve that problem, but certainly I think on the evidence, my hope is that Apocalypse Never will reset the conversation.
You remind me of Nietzsche and his warning of God is dead. That wasn't a celebration. That was a warning. Look out. Be careful, because you're going to create a God. And we saw what happened in his own home country. And it eventually did burn itself out. Unfortunately, it took so many people with it. I hope we don't have to go through that and this religion. Michael, anything that you could possibly need, we will stand with you. I know how brave you are. I know what you're up against, and I commend you for it. Even if we don't agree on everything, it doesn't matter. Standing up and having courage, is the only currency that matters, really, in the world today. We are in a frightening time, and you are a leader in courage. Thank you so much. And I urge you to go out. You bet. I urge you to go out and purchase Apocalypse Never by Michael Schellenberger. Make this a #1 New York Times bestseller. Go and buy this book right now. Apocalypse Never. I have not read it yet. I'm buying it today. Stu has read it and wholly endorse it, Stu?
Wholly endorse it. It's a great book. It's one of those books you're going to go back to a million times when your annoying friend brings up one of these claims, and you're going to be able to have all the links, all of it. It's great. It's great.
I'm going to buy a copy for my kids as well. Apocalypse Never. Get that book right now. Finally, the truth is being...
And I would say the same thing. Purchase the book, purchase the book, purchase the book. It's currently a #1 bestseller in the technology section on Amazon. We need it #1 in all the sections. we need it to be everywhere. But get the book, 100 pages of footnotes, know the information. And as Christians, we just need to realize this is a religious theological battle. This is a world system that has abandoned God, and they've replaced God with creation, with the creature. But as Christians, we want to address it first from a theological perspective, and the theological perspective is God created the heavens and the earth. He put us here. So, and this is very important. He put us here so that we could live here and use this. We're not a cancer. God created man in his image. We're not a cancer. Human life is valuable and it is sacred. And we are here to use, to care, protect the environment. We want to glorify God in how we use it and how we take care of it. So we want a biblical, there's that word again, biblical, not biblical. I don't know, biblical. I don't know why I'm having issues with it. As soon as I say it, it sounds wrong today. I don't know why. I'm having some issue there. But we need a biblical perspective. We really, truly do. We need a biblical perspective because there's these extremes, and we need to get away from the extremes. But one of the things that is always critical is having good information. And the reason I like this book is because it's not written by just some conservative that is going to be dismissed. This is someone who was right there in the environmental world, an environmentalist doing these things that he was celebrated. He was a hero. And now Forbes has taken down one of his articles, and now he's being attacked and being silenced. It's just no. You've got to have someone who says, wait a minute, we're going too far. And it doesn't matter which way. You need people on the conservative side. Hey, you conservatives, you're going too far. You're going to an extreme. You're getting away from truth and facts. And you need people on the liberal side to do that. Unless you have truth speakers speaking the truth. Well, if no one is speaking the truth, then the lies and the misinformation, they become the dominant narrative, and then everyone ends up misled and everyone becomes deceived. That's why this discussion is important. That's why I wanted you to hear that. And please go purchase the book. Again, it is called Apocalypse Never: Why Environmental Alarmism Hurts Us All. Apocalypse Never: Why Environmental Alarmism Hurts Us All. Get it. Read it, and let me know what you think. You can email me at newsif@yahoo.com, newsif@yahoo.com. All right, I'll stop right there. Hopefully that was beneficial, and I you know what? I'm even if you think it was a waste of time, I think it was beneficial because I think people definitely need to read this book. I really do, and I think we need to be able to address this issue from an intelligent, knowledgeable, balanced, and the word of the day, biblical way. All right. Thank you for listening. God bless.